Venezuela is one thing. What's your take on... I mean, by the way, we've heard some of this before, but the statements from some connected with the Trump administration in regards to Greenland in the last 24 hours.
Well, I think the voices you hear from the administration are really confirming that Donald Trump is a president who believes in spheres of influence rather than the sort of rule of law. And that was pretty public in their national security strategy that recently was published. There was a large part of it, the first part of it was talking about the Western Hemisphere. And for your viewers, the definition of the Western Hemisphere is South America, Central America, the Caribbean, Greenland and Canada. It's not just where, you might think. And, that national security strategy is full of, really, this sense that we have spheres of influence. And you've now heard people called the sort of relaunch of the Monroe document, which was a 19th century doctrine of the United States that said to Europe at the time, you stay out of our backyard and we'll stay out of yours. And people are now nicknaming it the Don Roe doctrine. So I think that's what we have in this United States president, not a man who believes in the rules-based system, but a man who believes in spheres of influence where the mighty control that sphere. That's why he seems much more understanding of President Putin. Potentially, it's encouraging for President Xi. And that leaves us, Europe, United Kingdom, in the middle. And countries who have benefited from the rules-based system and probably scratching our heads at the moment what to do next.
And we'll come on to talk about Ukraine and the implications in a second. Just on Greenland itself, I don't want to game this out too much, but what do you think our response should be, if he ever did something over Greenland, given the fact that obviously it's kind of effectively Danish territory and in essence then kind of part of NATO? I mean, some suggesting that would then be the end of NATO.
Well, it would be a very, very severe crisis for NATO because fundamentally in NATO we respect each other. We respect each other's sovereignties. It is a treaty of nation states. And for one ally within it to attack or take away or annex another nation's sovereign state is everything we don't believe in. And remember, what threatens Putin is NATO's values. Never mind our military capability. It is fundamentally what we stand for as an alliance. And that's an alliance established in 1948 after the war. And what we shouldn't forget is really in sort of 1945, the West, as we know it, rejected the spheres of influence type concept in the military might. We rejected Adolf Hitler, and the Cold War became a sort of fight between the Soviet efforts to have a sort of sphere of influence with communism and ideology. And we based our view on, look, as long as we're all free and independent and democratic with the rule of law, then that is what we all stand for. And that's what America's profited from. It's not just been a negative for the United States. They have enriched themselves globally with trade through that. So have we.
So on Ukraine, there is an argument, I think you and others hold this, that this will kind of embolden or kind of almost legitimises Vladimir Putin's actions in Ukraine. But does it really change the game that much in the sense that, Vladimir Putin's obviously been convinced for quite a long time that kind of Ukraine is his backyard, and what President Trump does in Latin America doesn't really change that foundational ideology, does it?
Well, I think we're in the most powerful nation on earth, effectively aligns itself with that type of view that legality doesn't matter, sovereignty doesn't matter if you're the biggest... you're the biggest boy in the playground, it doesn't matter.
But haven't the Russians thought that for years? They would point, and they have done, by the way, over the last decade. So, for example, to US action in Iraq, they would say the US has never really adhered to international law. That was an argument they would consider.
Well, I think what we've seen so far is Russia restrained on the NATO border. They have never really crossed into NATO. We've seen recently in the last 6 months sort of forays of drones into Poland and provocation and sub-threshold activities such as we've seen in the United Kingdom of proxies being used to both target Keir Starmer's properties and indeed firebombing of warehouses in South London in May last year. So we've definitely seen a bit of that. But fundamentally and militarily, the Russians have been cautious of NATO. They haven't wanted to take us on directly. But if the biggest backer of NATO, the man who currently provides 70% of the capability of NATO, decides that he's not for that anymore, or indeed isn't going to be triggered by the breach of the sort of alliance, That's much more dangerous because that leaves Putin open. And Greenland is really important because Greenland is absolutely at the sort of fulcrum between the Western Hemisphere, but also Europe. And what does Putin want more than anything? What does he want, going way back to his KGB times? He wants a schism between one side of the Atlantic and the other. He wants the United States and Europe to be in a break that frees him up. And Greenland is the perfect candidate for that. And I wouldn't be surprised if right now bots in St. Petersburg are magnifying across social media as much friction and division as possible around that very thing.